Though Pangolier has only been added to the game fairly recently, he's made a huge impact in Dota's landscape, both in the lore as well as the gameplay. What the? Oh, show must go on. Be sure to ward the river because on the way is the history of Pudge. Pudge, as many of us know him now, is centered around his gank-heavy abilities in the early game and potential for single-target pickoffs in the late game. Meat Hook is the signature ability, which has Pudge throwing out a skill shot hook and dragging back the first unit that gets in the way, although only enemies will be damaged. Rot is a toggleable AoE damaging aura that deals a damage per second and also applies a slow to enemies caught in the area and damages Pudge for the same amount. The damage that Pudge takes from Rot can be used to deny himself, so if you're being ganked by multiple enemies, or if you're 20 gold short of a teleport scroll, feel free to turn it on and let the damage do its work. Flesh Heap is a passive ability that gives Pudge magic resistance and he gains permanent bonus strength every time he is in the radius of a dying enemy. Pudge's ult is Dismember, a channeling ability that disables a target enemy as well as dealing out damage per second. Though Dismember is blocked by Lincoln Sphere, it does pierce spell immunity, proving that not even magic itself can stand up to the power of the Munchies. Pudge was first introduced in the Guinsoo era of Dota in patch 5.10, but this version is significantly different from the hero I just described. Here, the Butcher's skill set revolves around the use of corpses and summoning units under his control. In his debut run, Pudge resembled Beastmaster if he really stopped caring about his body image, as he'd be able to control swarms of summoned units to melt down buildings and heroes alike. His skills would create corpses and raise those various corpses from the dead, while his ult summoned carrion flies that could multiply. It's more appropriate to say that you're not really fighting Pudge, but rather a mobile pain factory. I mean, you can try, but do you wanna? This edition of Pudge was removed in 5.62, and it wasn't until October 22, 2004 in patch 5.76 that Pudge would be reworked into the lovable beef man that we all know today. This time in Dota's history was kind of a gap period between the Guinsoo and Ice Frog eras, as a community member by the name of Nakis had taken charge of development. Nakis had introduced heroes into the game such as Sand King and Shadow Fiend, but on the topic of Pudge he mentioned that this hero was his pride and joy. He wrote in a Reddit AMA that he was most proud of Meat Hook due to it being the first ability of its kind in MOBAs, along with the relative ease of programming it. Nakis wouldn't know the impact of creating Meat Hook at the time, but it would be a prominent staple of Dota and create its own archetype of characters in other games. In the freshly reworked Pudge, Flesh Heap would gain strength from both heroes as well as creeps, although Pudge does have to last hit the unit in order to receive the strength bonus. In 5.83, Pudge as well as Vengeful Spirit had the distinct dishonor of not being able to buy Blink Dagger. Balancing purposes aside, this was likely done to prevent the Pudge from blinking onto a cliff or other impassable terrain and hooking someone onto it with no means of escape. Keep in mind that flying couriers weren't introduced until 6.38, so delivering yourself a TP scroll was out of the question. Rot in 6.00 was given the ability to slow units for the first time, sealing the fate of any scrub who didn't have the common sense to buy wards. Pudge's first Aghanim Scepter upgrade came in patch 6.60, which gives Dismember additional damage based on a portion of Pudge's strength and heals him for the total damage dealt. Flesh Heap was reworked in 6.64, and now it only grants strength to Pudge from enemy hero deaths, but as long as he's within 400 range of the dying unit, he'll get the bonus. Finally, patch 6.68 brought about two important changes. Flesh Heap stacks would be retroactive, so if you got 100 kills before leveling the skill, you would have 100 stacks once you leveled it up, whereas before, those kills wouldn't count. Furthermore, Meat Hook had its damage type changed from physical to pure, and the damage values were rebalanced to reflect this change. Similar to Wraith King, Pudge also has a character connection to Diablo while fortunately being able to maintain his character model. The first boss of Diablo was known as the Butcher, and upon entering his floor of the dungeon, he would greet you with the phrase,
"Fresh meat."
Pudge would use the sound line whenever casting Dismember, thereby establishing physical dominance over the other tinier, less corpulent heroes, and it's no coincidence that his title happens to be the Butcher. In the Warcraft 3 era, Pudge's popularity as a character was expressed in a couple of different ways. For one, you can morph the courier into a mini Pudge, which shows that even a decaying abomination can be cute if you make it small enough. There was also the custom game Pudge Wars, which focused the gameplay around hooking enemy Pudges in the dark, and later versions of the game would include items from other heroes like Barothrom's Lantern and Tiny's Arm. It's crazy to think how Meat Hook just started out as an ambitious concept in Nakis' mind, and the skill would serve as a blueprint for so many different characters from other games. The most direct influence would be Devourer from Heroes of Newerth, who was a one-to-one port of Pudge. Gameplay-wise, the two were identical except for Devourer's ult, which increases his max HP and the radius of decay the longer he channels it. Staff of the Masters changed the name of his ult from Devour to Om Nom Nom, and in the 4.2.0 update, it changed Gutling Hook to Extra Hungry Hook. Also, his voice sounds a lot like if Omni Knight were going through a deep, edgy, poetic phase.
Bone of your bones, flesh of your flesh. Now you know what it is like to be hungry for something. Show me the way.
The natural evolution of the Warcraft abomination comes in the form of Stitches from Heroes of the Storm. Here, Stitches has all the makings of Pudge while still feeling noticeably different. There's the hook, some AoE damaging gas, and one of his heroic abilities can take an enemy out of a fight, but that's only because he actually vores them whole instead of channeling a disable. Stitches really feels like what a parallel universe version of Pudge would be, having every ability's core function at hand, but tweaked enough to feel like a different character altogether. While we were talking about Blizzard, Overwatch does have a big fat guy with a hook in the form of Roadhog. I don't think he eats people, but he does seem smelly. In League of Legends, Blitzcrank is the resident hooker, although being a steam golem is a whole lot different from being the chunky Frankenstein's monsters we've been looking at before. Maybe if we take his definitely not Blitzcrank skin, add on a zombie head, crop in a nice little cleaver, yeah, that's a little bit more, yeah. I could go on and even mention characters like Shank and Grom over here, but let's be real, they're nerds. Sorry boys. Pudge entered Dota 2 and TI1 with the initial group of heroes. Valve decided to take a couple of artistic liberties and added things that no one really expected. For one, Pudge has a nice little hairdo, and he now speaks with a Cockney accent, which was a little jarring at first, but it does make his character stand out more. On the August 15, 2012 patch, an undocumented change took away Pudge's hair, making him look more like the Warcraft abominations and giving him more of a monstrous appearance than before. Kind of looks like a hulking flesh baby to me, which arguably is way more nightmarish than a cannibalistic butcher. Much to the enjoyment of players, the hair was added back a week later. In patch 6.79, Pudge was finally able to buy a Blink Dagger almost 9 years after it was disabled in the first place. To get around the idea of being stranded in the middle of impassable terrain, units who are hooked this way do get free pathing for 5 seconds. So if you don't have the foresight to carry extra TP scrolls, a Force Staff, or a Blink Dagger by this point, you won't get punished for a snowballing Pudge. In 6.82, a huge buff went undocumented as Meat Hook started piercing spell immunity, dealing the damage as well as hooking back units who have BKB or some other form of spell immunity on. 6.86 saw the rework of Pudge's original Aghanims upgrade, and instead of upgrading Dismember, Meat Hook would have its cooldown lowered to 4 seconds at all levels, and the damage would increase, although it did receive a slight nerf in the following patch. In an act of compromise, Dismember did gain elements of the old Aghanims upgrade as its damage was rescaled to include Pudge's strength as well as healing him for the damage dealt. Pudge's talents in both 7.00 and 7.07 didn't do much in terms of revolutionizing the game, but they did make it so that a stopping Pudge could destroy the enemy team even harder with the Flesh Heap talents, or you can make loads of money with the extra gold per minute talents. 3 extra seconds of Dismember does give the unfortunate target some time to think about their life choices and plan out their next grocery list as you gnaw them to death. In 7.07, Meat Hook was able to hook runes and refunds your mana if you manage to snag one. Meanwhile, Dismember pulls the target closer to Pudge over its duration, so if you pick up an Aether Lens, it's a little bit less awkward as you can actually pull heroes into Rot's AoE. Pudge has had a lot of love shown to him during the various international tournaments throughout the years, and a lot of it is owed to professional player Dendi, who is synonymous with the hero. In TI3, Dendi and Puppy from Na'Vi would consistently perform the Pudge and Chen combo, hooking enemies into the fountain through Chen's ability to send allies back home. In TI4, players who bought the compendium would receive a Pudgeling Courier, and Butch was available for anyone who bought the early release of it, though Butch was already available as a very rare drop in the Treasure of the Bottled Cloud and Treasure of Molten Steel. In TI5, Pudge would make a cameo appearance in the All-Stars game dressed by none other than Dendi, sitting next to his old teammate Puppy from Na'Vi. During TI7, the Arcana vote this time put up Pudge and Rubik in the final round, with Pudge allegedly barely scraping by with a 0.016% margin. Oh, this is good. This is fantastic even, because Pudge doesn't have enough cosmetics, like not enough at all. Oh, we're still scrolling, aren't we? Not enough at all. Everyone has experienced at some point a rampaging Pudge that single-handedly demolished your entire team, and despite that, we can't help but love the Big Oaf through our memories of the blood-soaked carnage. I'm Dennis Atal, and that was the history of Pudge.